The kitchens of the Areola spire shimmered with the cold precision of a laboratory. Every surface polished to mirror light, every sound calibrated into rhythm, the hiss of steam, the scrape of ladles, the pulse of vents moving air that was too clean, too dry for a world made mostly of water. Through the glass walls, the turquoise ocean below rippled with the reflection of stormlight, soft and endless. Rion Calder walked the corridor between prep lines with his inspection slate hugged against his chest, the posture of a man who'd memorized every rule meant to keep blood and noise out of his life. 34. Ex-field medic, 6 years in combat triage before he traded med bays for kitchens. He told himself this was peace now, a different kind of discipline. But as he moved through the sterile hum of the spire, that illusion thinned like fog. He saw order, yes, but not health. Efficiency without pulse. The cooks didn't speak except in clipped confirmations. Their eyes were down, movements mechanical. Only one caught his attention, the young woman at Station 3. She was Rena, blue-skinned with an opal shimmer that caught the white light when she moved, her hair gold like heated copper. Her namatag read Naya Sharen. He watched her reach for a rack of trays, her motions precise but too measured, as if every turn of her torso calculated to avoid a bruise. Old instincts, the ones Rian had sworn he'd retired, clicked awake in him. The way she breathed short, shallow, was the kind of rhythm you learned when pain was a habit. She flinched at a burst of steam and pretended not to. When she bent, he saw a flicker under the strap of her apron, a line of yellow-green discoloration where skin met fabric. Not an accident, not a fall. Fingers. He forced himself to keep still, to make another note on the slate, to wear the mask of neutrality that had once kept him alive in field command. But the smell of antiseptic and metal twisted through his memory, and for an instant he was back in a war tent, realizing someone was dying 2 beds down while the officers argued about paperwork. He inhaled, steadying. The job was supposed to be numbers, waste logs, safety codes. Yet the longer he watched her, the more the rhythm of the kitchen sounded wrong. He checked the sanitation metrics anyway, moving to the archive console at the far wall. It was cold, bright, impersonal, exactly the kind of place where truth went to disappear. The log scrolled past his eyes. Accident reports, rest breaks, injury forms. Every column was neat. Too neat. Every worker listed perfect compliance, 0 incidents. Every bruise categorized as self-inflicted strain. He ran the audit filters again, this time tracing vendor codes. The same contractor tag appeared across multiple colonies VAR-12 Farcon Labor Services. He'd seen it before, buried in an old report flagged as resolved. His gut tightened. A pattern of false injury claims, hidden under uniform medical phrasing. Worker careless. Steam exposure. Error closed. Lies written in bureaucracy's handwriting. He rubbed his temple, staring at the falsified entries. In the reflection of the glass console, he saw his own face tired, lean, eyes the color of someone who'd seen systems eat people and call it procedure. Behind him, Nyesha reached for another tray, wincing before she straightened. It was a tiny movement, invisible to anyone not trained to watch for pain. To him, it was a scream. The kitchen's white light suddenly felt harsh. His slate blinked with approval prompts, asking for digital sign-off. He stared at the cursor, flashing beside the words, "No anomalies detected." It waited, patient, unfeeling. He should have just signed it, closed the audit, gone home to his quiet apartment above the rain line. That was the deal he made with himself when he left the front. But his hand wouldn't move. He glanced once more at the woman with the bruises, at the quiet efficiency of people pretending not to notice. The same sickness in a different uniform. Something old rose in his chest, the defiance that used to get him reprimanded. The refusal to walk away from damage labeled acceptable. He exhaled, thumb hovering over the approval key, then shifted it and entered a new tag instead. Clause 12 unauthorized investigation pending. The system chirped a warning. He ignored it. For the first time in 6 years, Rian Calder broke protocol. And as the rain outside thickened against the spire's glass walls, he understood that peace wasn't found in silence. It was stolen from those too afraid to make noise. Rain lashed the pearl docks in long, slanting sheets that turned the walkways into mirrors of light. The air was thick with salt and the tongue of engine oil, voices of vendors echoing beneath the canopy as drones hummed overhead carrying crates of seaweed meal and spice barrels. Rian Calder stood at the edge of the platform, coat collar high against the spray, slate clutched under one arm. He'd told himself he was just gathering clarification for his report, but he'd stopped believing that lie somewhere between the ferry and the market. This wasn't protocol anymore. It was instinct. The old kind. The kind that never waited for permission. The vendor office he sought was tucked between two steam-stained buildings, its sign sharp and sterile amid the chaos. Varkan Labor Services. Inside, the air smelled of synthetic citrus and metal polish, a perfect disguise for rot. A young clerk barely glanced up from her terminal. Appointment code? She droned. Independent audit, Rian said. Clause 12 inquiry. The words made her fingers still. Her eyes flicked up, uncertain. He knew the effect those words had. Clause 12 wasn't supposed to be spoken aloud unless there was a breach serious enough to threaten corporate suspension. She pressed a button under the desk, whispering into a cum bead. A moment later, a voice rasped through the intercom. Send him in. The door hissed open, revealing a glass-walled office with a view of the rain-choked docks. Darren Varkan stood behind a desk that looked imported from somewhere far too rich for the labor sector. A slice of ocean glass and chrome surrounded by soft amber light. Mid-40s, tall, immaculate. The kind of man who measured worth by obedience. His smile was calm, but his eyes were small and sharp. Inspector Calder, he said, extending a hand that Rian didn't take. To what do I owe the surprise? Rian placed his slate on the desk, scrolling the display until the falsified logs glowed in cold blue. You placed a Rennie worker named Nyasha Wren at the Arela Spire under a 30-hour rotation. Her rest breaks were never taken. Her medical logs show 0 incidents. That's false. Varkan leaned back, unbothered. Cooks burn themselves, inspectors. They bruise. You can't expect me to babysit every worker who scuffs a hand on a rack. These weren't accidents, Rian said quietly. They were beatings. The vendor's smile didn't fade, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I see. So this is Moral Outrage Day. Let me save you the trouble. Laborers don't file complaints because they can't afford to. They need work. I provide it. You audit kitchens, not ethics. Rian's voice stayed even, the tone he used once to calm soldiers before surgery. You'll issue a public apology at the Spire mid-meal assembly. You'll acknowledge the abuse and sign reparative papers under Clause 12. Varkan laughed softly. You think anyone cares about one bruised alien cook? You'll lose your post before I lose a contract. Rian leaned forward just enough that the light from the holoscreen reflected in his eyes. I've already flagged your name in the Maritime Guild system. If this doesn't end today, your next contract will open with a red mark under Investigation for Falsification of Medical Data. Every colonial client will see it. Within 48 hours, you'll have nothing left but this office. The silence between them tightened, the sound of rain filling the gaps. Varkan's mask cracked for just a heartbeat, a muscle twitching in his temple. You're bluffing, he said. You'll find out at midday, Rian replied. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. And if you move her before the hearing, that's witness coercion. Clause 12. Jail time. He didn't wait for a response. Outside, the storm swallowed him, wind tearing at his coat, the city's glow painting his face in cold colors. He felt the old pulse again, the one that came before a fight, the heartbeat that told him he was right to act even when it would cost him. He boarded the ferry back toward the spire as thunder rolled across the sea. Through the window, the world blurred into streaks of turquoise and gray, and he saw Nyash's reflection in his mind, the way she'd flinched, the quiet way she said everything was fine, it wasn't fine. It hadn't been for a long time. By the time he reached the upper decks, the rain had turned to mist. He stepped into the spire's service hall, water dripping from his coat, and walked straight to the kitchen. Nyasha was still there, cleaning her station, shoulders hunched but movement steady. She looked up when he stopped beside her. "You're back," she said, cautious. The shelves fixed. "I know," he said. "You'll be called to the atrium tomorrow at midmeal." Her brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because you deserve to be seen." She stared at him for a long moment, her voice small. "You shouldn't get involved." He gave a tired smile. "I've heard that before." As he turned away, she whispered something he almost didn't hear. "They don't forgive people who notice." He stopped at the doorway, rainwater pooling around his boots. "Then they'll have to learn how." When he left, she stood alone at her station, her hands trembling slightly, knife still in motion, though she'd stopped chopping. Outside, the ocean struck the spire's hull with relentless rhythm, like the heartbeat of something waking. And for the first time in years, Rian Calder wasn't sure if he was walking toward ruin or redemption, but he knew he couldn't stop now. The next day dawned gray, the sky and sea bleeding into one another until the whole horizon looked like a single sheet of moving glass. The Arela spire loomed over the water, its upper decks lost in mist. Inside, the kitchens ran at full rhythm, steam hissing, utensils clattering, voices clipped and hurried. But beneath that routine hum, something electric hung in the air. Word had spread. Inspections didn't return twice in 1 week. Auditors didn't summon vendors for public assembly. And yet, Rian Calder stood at the center of the atrium with his slate in hand, its blue light reflecting off the steel counters and damp tile. The workers gathered slowly, curiosity heavy in their eyes. They whispered in Rennie and human tongues alike, trading rumors until silence fell. Even the vents seemed to pause when Darren Varkin entered, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. He'd traded the expensive suit for a more modest uniform, but his arrogance still fit perfectly. "Inspector Calder," he said smoothly, his voice carrying the rehearsed ease of a man who expected to control every room he entered. "You wanted a hearing. Let's get this spectacle over with." Rian didn't rise to the bait. He glanced to the prep station where Naya Sharen stood, her hands clenched against the counter. He nodded once. She hesitated, then stepped forward, the crowd's murmurs following her like a tide. The bruises along her ribs were fading now, muted yellow against blue skin, but still visible. She didn't try to hide them. Varkin's gaze flickered at the sight before he recovered, smiling as if none of it mattered. "Per procedural request," Rian began, his voice steady, but carrying an edge that cut through the quiet. "The vendor representative Darren Varkin has been called to account for falsified injury records and contract violations under Clause 12 of the Maritime Labor Statutes." He tapped the slate, and the holographic projection flared to life, displaying her falsified rest logs in neat columns of lies. The reports claim Miss Wren took all scheduled breaks, sustained no injuries, and received adequate care. These statements are false. Gasps rippled through the staff. Varkin smirked, trying to mask his discomfort. "You don't understand the system, Calder. It's self-reporting. If the worker hides her wounds, that's her error, not mine. Then perhaps she explain herself, Rian said. He turned to Nyesha. If you wish to speak, the record is open. Her throat worked once before she found her voice. It came out soft but clear. You told me to work faster when I couldn't lift a pot. You said I bent easily so I could bend again. The silence that followed was heavy, sharp, alive. You said no one would care. She looked around the room now, at the other cooks, the dishwashers, the vendors, all those who had seen but never spoken. But someone did. Her words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They carried the kind of truth that made people remember what their silence cost. Varkin's mask slipped completely now, his composure cracking under the weight of 100 staring eyes. Rian pressed the final command on his slate. The hologram displayed Varkin's forged signatures, every falsified injury report stamped with his approval. Effective immediately, Rian said. Varkan Labor Services is placed under guild suspension pending full audit. Reparative compensation for all affected workers will be drawn from vendor bond funds. Varkin's face drained of color. You can't. I can, Rian cut in. Clause 12 grants emergency enforcement when a contractor is caught falsifying injury data. It's not just law. It's conscience codified. He turned to Nyasha again. You deserve better than to heal in silence. The slate chimed as the order uploaded to the Public Guild archive. It was official now, irreversible. The other workers began to murmur, not with fear this time, but with something fragile and new, relief. One of the older cooks stepped forward, resting a trembling hand on Nyasha's shoulder. You did nothing wrong, the woman said. None of us did. That broke the tension like sunlight through rain. Applause, quiet, uncertain, at first rose from the back of the room, spreading until the sound filled the entire kitchen. Nyasha's eyes shimmered, silver rings bright with something between shock and disbelief. Varkin stood frozen, surrounded by the noise of people who no longer feared him. Rian met his gaze once more, calm but final. You'll sign the reparative clause now, he said. The man's hand shook as he pressed his signature into the hologram. The blue light stamped it into permanence. When the display flickered out, Rian deactivated his slate and turned away. It was over. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but over. He stepped toward Nyasha. You're free of him, he said quietly. She stared at the ground, her voice a whisper. Free doesn't feel real yet. It will, he said. I've arranged temporary housing in the quiet wing. You'll be safe there. She blinked, disoriented by kindness. Why? He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Because you shouldn't have to heal where you were hurt. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. Then she nodded once, slow and deliberate. The applause faded, replaced by the steady hum of vents and the rhythmic fall of rain against the glass walls. Rian pocketed his slate and exhaled. The spire's lights caught the mist outside, scattering it like shards of crystal. For the first time in years, the air in that place felt human. As the crowd dispersed, Nyasha lingered by the window, her reflection shimmering against the turquoise sea beyond. Rian paused at the door, looking back just once. She was still standing there, eyes fixed on the horizon as if the storm had finally broken for her. In that silence, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. He'd done what the system wouldn't, and she'd done what he couldn't stand without fear. Neither of them realized it yet, but the echo of that moment was already traveling outward through the networks, through the guild servers, through every colony where someone else was hiding the same bruises. The storm outside had changed direction. The rain softened overnight, turning from thunder into a constant whisper against the glass walls. By morning, The Aurelia spire seemed almost peaceful again, though the air still carried the quiet weight of what had happened the day before. Rian Calder stood by his apartment window, watching the ocean churn below. From this height, the world looked clean, untouched by pain or politics, but he knew better. He'd spent his whole adult life pretending order meant safety. Now he'd seen what that lie cost. Behind him, the kettle clicked softly as it boiled. The room was small, efficient, sterile, just like the kitchens he inspected. But for the first time since he'd moved in, he'd set out 2 cups. A knock came at the door, hesitant, unsure. When he opened it, Neisha stood there, rain still in her hair, her clothes damp but folded neatly as if she'd fought the weather and won by precision. She clutched a small bag to her chest, her entire life compressed into fabric and silence. "The guild sent me," she said softly. "They said you arranged housing." He stepped aside, gesturing her in. "You're early. Couldn't sleep." Her eyes flicked over the minimalist room. No color, no decoration, just lines and light. "You live like an inventory form." He half smiled. "Easier that way." She placed her bag on the floor and stood by the window, staring at the mist. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. Pale blue and gold, bruises fading beneath new skin. "It's quiet here," she said. "Too quiet." "You'll get used to it," he replied. She shook her head. "People like me don't get used to quiet. We expect someone to break it." He didn't argue. He poured coffee instead, the bitter smell filling the sterile air. She turned when he handed her a cup, fingers brushing his small contact, unintentional but real. "You don't talk much," she said. "Occupational hazard," he replied. "Auditors aren't hired for conversation." "No," she said, taking a cautious sip. "You talk like someone who used to say too much and paid for it." He met her eyes then, tired and steady. Once, the silence stretched again, but it wasn't empty anymore. It felt alive, like 2 people remembering how to exist in the same air. She wandered toward the counter, tracing the edge with her hand. "You really did it," she said. "The hearing, the apology. No one's ever done that before." "They should have," he said. "It shouldn't take a war veteran to notice what's right in front of them." Her gaze flickered to him. "War?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Triage medic. 2 tours. I left because I got tired of deciding who lived long enough to fill out a form. And now you fix kitchens." "Now I fix systems," he said quietly. "It's slower, but sometimes they stay fixed." "And if they don't?" she asked. He took a sip of coffee, grimaced at the taste. "Then I start again." She almost smiled at that. Almost. For a long time, they said nothing more. The rain became a hush against the walls, and the world beyond the glass blurred into shifting silver. Eventually, she placed her cup down and said, "You didn't have to help me. You didn't deserve what happened." "Deserve doesn't matter," she murmured. "People like me, we survive because we don't expect rescue." He stepped closer, careful not to invade her space. "Maybe it's time you stopped surviving and started living." The words landed heavier than he meant them to. Her eyes lifted slowly, searching his face for the trap that wasn't there. "You really believe that?" "I have to," he said. "Otherwise the war never ended." She exhaled, shaking her head as if trying to dislodge something stuck between fear and hope. "You're strange, Calder. So I've been told." She smiled, just barely. "You don't know when to stop. Probably why I'm still breathing." That earned a quiet laugh from her small, fragile, and utterly real. She covered it quickly, embarrassed by the sound. "I haven't laughed in years," she admitted. "Feels wrong." "It isn't," he said. "It's proof." "Of what?" "That you made it out." The words hung there, simple and sharp. She turned toward the window again, arms folded, staring into the mist. "You think this changes anything?" she asked. "One apology. One man's name in a file." "No," he said. "But it starts something. Change always begins as paperwork." She laughed again, soft and disbelieving. "You're impossible. You said that yesterday, too. And maybe it's true." Her voice gentled. "You should rest. I'll cook." He blinked, caught off guard. "You don't have to." "I know," she said. "That's why I will." He watched her cross to the compact kitchen, moving like someone reclaiming territory. She found spices, checked the burners, adjusted utensils without asking. Within minutes, the air filled with the smell of varan root and sea herbs. The sound of her humming a faint wrenny melody, low and steady, filled the silence he hadn't realized was suffocating him. He sat at the small table, elbows resting on his knees, listening. When she finally placed a plate in front of him, sliced refox, salted with Arini crystals, it looked simple but perfect. "Taste," she said. He did, and the flavor startled him. "You were wasted in that kitchen." "I still am," she said, though her eyes softened. "But this feels better." They ate in quiet companionship, the kind that required no explanations. Outside, the ocean caught the pale light and threw it back through the glass in slow waves. When they finished, she washed the plates while he watched from the table. "You stare too much," she said without looking at him. "I'm learning," he said. "Learning what?" "How people heal." She paused, hands in the water, and glanced at him over her shoulder. "And what have you learned?" "That it's never quiet," he said. "It's just a different kind of noise." She smiled faintly. Maybe that's enough. When the rain thickened again, she lingered by the window, arms wrapped around herself, her reflection faint and human-shaped in the glow. Rian stood a few feet behind her, saying nothing. He didn't need to. In that silence, both of them understood the same truth: the world didn't change overnight. But for once, it had begun. Night fell like a slow tide over Alice May, the storm easing into a rhythm that felt almost deliberate, as if the sea itself was breathing with the city. The spire's lights shimmered through the mist in broken gold lines, and down below, the market docks hummed with low conversation. Rian Calder leaned against the balcony rail of his apartment, listening to the faint chorus of life rising from the water. He'd forgotten what a living city sounded like. For weeks, silence had been his armor. Now it was being chipped away by laughter from the docks, by the clatter of ferries returning, by Niesha's soft humming inside his kitchen. She'd made the sterile place feel human again. But that peace trembled with something larger now movement beneath the surface, a vibration he couldn't yet name. Inside, Niesha was bent over his datapad, her brow furrowed in concentration. The projection hovered before her. An internal guild message leaked through informal channels. Dozens of other auditors forwarding the Spire report with a single tag clause. 12. The phrase had escaped the kitchen, grown teeth, and started walking through the colonies. "They're talking about it," she said, voice low, uncertain. "Every sector, every port. Workers are asking for the files. They want to know how to invoke it." Rian set his cup down, watching the light flicker across her face. "Good. Maybe now someone will remember what those laws were for." "You think they'll let it spread?" "They can't stop it. Not anymore." He meant it, but part of him knew better. Systems always fought back at the chime of an incoming message cut through their quiet. He stepped closer, scanning the notification. A guild internal warning. Unauthorized dissemination of restricted case files. Subject: Calder, Rian. Investigation pending. He exhaled through his nose, half amusement, half dread. There it is, he said. The hammer. Nyasha turned sharply. They're coming for you? Maybe. It's protocol. Because you told the truth? He looked at her, weary but calm. Truth and protocol rarely sit at the same table. She rose, fists curling slightly. You can't face them alone. I've done worse, he said quietly. Besides, they won't shoot a compliance officer on live feed. They'll bury you quieter than that, she snapped, the tremor in her voice betraying fear she didn't want to name. Rian studied her for a moment, then reached out, laying a steady hand on her shoulder. You're safe here. That's what matters. No, she said fiercely, looking up at him. That's not enough anymore. The next morning, word broke through the local nets. Markin's office had been raided. He wasn't just falsifying logs. He was part of a transport ring selling bonded labor across the outer colonies. The guild denied connection, but the data traced upward to corporate accounts and ministerial sign-offs. By noon, Clause 12 was more than a labor code. It was a rebellion. Nyasha watched the broadcasts with her hands trembling, half awe, half disbelief. You didn't just save me, she whispered. You started this. Rian shook his head. It started itself. I just didn't stop it. The spire's upper levels filled with unrest workers refusing shifts, cooks staging silent vigils, inspectors cross-sharing case files. The guild issued containment orders. Drones patrolled the docks. Yet the more they tried to smother it, the louder it grew. Rian and Nyasha moved carefully, their apartment now doubling as a meeting point for reformers and frightened workers. She kept the lights low, brewed coffee for visitors, taught them how to write testimonies. He helped them encrypt data streams, his old war-born patience guiding shaky hands. One night, as thunder rumbled over the ocean again, she found him asleep at the table, head resting against his folded arms. Holoscreens still glowing faintly. She turned them off and covered him with a blanket. His face in sleep looked unguarded, younger somehow. She hesitated, then brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. He stirred, but didn't wake. You can't save everyone, she whispered, more to herself than him. But her next breath came lighter, freer. Still, you try. The following day, a message arrived anonymous, routed through 8 encrypted relays. Guild suppression vote scheduled. Clause 12 will be erased. Attached was a dataship. On it, evidence of the interstellar procurement network, linking labor abuse to the Galactic Trade Ministry. The same people funding the guild. Rian stared at it, feeling the weight of inevitability settle on his shoulders. If this goes public, he said, we'll both be hunted. Nyasha looked him straight in the eye. Then we run together. He opened his mouth to protest, but something in her tone stopped him. She wasn't asking. She was choosing. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that had more sadness than joy. All right, he said. Together. They spent the night preparing and encrypting the files, routing them through back channels, packaging them for release to every newsnet and independent station across the colonies. As dawn rose over the turquoise sea, the first rays of sunlight struck the spire's glass dome, refracting into 1,000 shards of gold. Nyasha pressed the final key. The transmission began. Somewhere below, 1,000 devices lit up with the same message. Clause 12, the right to be seen. The flood started quietly, like rain before a storm. Rian watched from the balcony as the city came alive, alarms, voices, ships lifting from the docks. He could feel the scale of what they'd done settling in, vast and irreversible. Nyasha stepped beside him, the wind tangling her hair, her eyes bright with equal parts fear and wonder. You really think they'll listen? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to the horizon, where the light fractured across the waves. They already are. Behind them, The com buzzed with incoming transmissions, thousands of them, all carrying variations of the same phrase workers invoking the clause. The galaxy was waking up. Rian turned to her then, a rare softness in his voice. Whatever happens next, we did something right. Nyasha nodded, leaning into the railing, her shoulder brushing his. Right isn't always safe, she murmured. No, he said, watching the dawn break wider. But it's the only thing worth dying for. As the first sunlight spilled across their faces, the world below erupted in noise protests, ships, shouts, beginnings. The sea answered with a deep, steady roar. Above it all, two figures stood side by side in a tower of glass and rain, knowing the moment they had made would never belong to them again. The storm they started was no longer theirs to control, and that was how revolutions began. By the time the sun set again, Alice May no longer felt like the same world. The spire's lower decks glowed with emergency lighting. Patrol drones flickered past the glass with their search beams slicing through mist. Data channels across the colonies pulsed with the same phrase clause: 12 confirmed, archived, copied, repeated. Someone had turned Rian Calder's private rebellion into a contagion of conscience. The city's silence, once sterile, now hummed with defiance. Rian stood in the dim light of his apartment, watching message after message appear across the hollow wall. Worker testimony received. Audit request submitted. Clause 12 invoked. His system couldn't keep up with the flood. Each one carried a story, a name, a voice. Someone had broken the wall. Someone else had heard. Behind him, Nyasha moved through the narrow space like someone living on the edge of a storm. Her hair was still damp from the rain, her clothes wrinkled, eyes bright and haunted. She'd stopped being just a cook weeks ago. Now she was the face of a movement neither of them had intended to start. They've issued a warrant, she said quietly, handing him the datapad. The display showed his name, blinking red, Rian Calder, dissemination of classified guild data. He stared at it, jaw tightening. They're moving faster than I expected. So we move faster, she said. Outside, protests had erupted across the dock levels, workers forming circles, chanting her name, his, the clause itself. The Guild Council had declared emergency review. The net feeds showed shaky footage of riots spreading across the orbital colonies. His terminal pinged again another message, this one from a name he recognized. Captain Marin Voss, an old comrade from the triage corps, now a logistics officer in the Galactic Trade Ministry. Her message was short. Rian, they've traced the leak back to you. Don't stay surface side. I can get you off-world if you meet me by midnight. But the girl can't come. Too visible. He read it twice, then turned off the screen. We have a way out, he said. Nyasha was by the window, arms folded, staring into the thick blue night. You mean you do? They won't risk extraction if they think you're coming. And you're not going either. He stepped closer, voice low but firm. If they arrest me, Clause 12 dies with the scandal. They'll erase every record, rewrite the files, say it was all a hoax. She turned, fire in her eyes. Then you can't go alone. If they erase it, I'll testify again, louder this time. They'll kill you, he said. Then let them try. Something inside him broke open, then an ache he hadn't felt since the war, when he'd watched too many people stand for something too late. You've done enough, he whispered. No, she said. Not until it means something. Before he could argue again, his comm lit up with an incoming broadcast public frequency. The Guild Council chamber appeared in hologram. 12 figures seated beneath a dome of cold light, faces drawn, tension visible. The council speaker's voice carried across every screen in the city. Effective immediately, the Maritime Labor Board acknowledges systemic violation of human and alien rights across 34 colonies. The Clause 12 Accord will be ratified as permanent statute. The room erupted in shouts, half approval, half outrage. The speaker continued, "This reform will extend to all labor sectors under Guild jurisdiction. We thank Inspector Rian Calder and the testimony of Nyasha Wren for their ... service." Nyasha froze. Rian blinked once, disbelief flickering into realization. The clause had passed. Against every prediction, it had survived. But beneath the speaker's words was something colder, a tone of reclamation, ownership. They were trying to take it from them, even as they legalized it. "They're erasing us," Nyasha said. "They'll make it theirs." Rian nodded. "Then we stay ghosts." He walked to the terminal and began encrypting every archive again, layering code upon code. "If they want to own the law, fine. But the truth stays ours." He uploaded a final data packet, his private AI ethics code, merged with the testimonies Nyasha had collected. When he hit send, the system blinked and projected a single name, NISHA Ethical Oversight Subroutine active. A soft female voice filled the room, her accent faintly Rena. "Acknowledged. Directive. Protect the scene." Nyasha stared at the light, realization dawning slowly. "What did you do?" "I gave the clause a voice," he said. "One they can't shut down. Every audit system across the Guild will use her protocols now. They'll never know it's you." She stepped forward, eyes glimmering, torn between awe and sorrow. "You made me into code?" "Into conscience," he said softly. "You said people like you don't get quiet. Now you never have to." Outside, thunder rolled again. Protesters were cheering, some crying, some praying. A movement had found its breath. He turned to her, searching her face. "They'll come for us soon." But history's already moved on. She took his hand, fingers trembling but sure. "Then let's see what comes next." They left the apartment together as the first patrol lights flashed through the mist. Down the corridor, a transport bay door yawned open, and the smell of ocean wind poured in. They stepped onto the maintenance deck overlooking the water, the world around them alive with rain and voices. Far below, ships burned across the horizon, some fleeing, some returning, some simply free for the first time. Nyasha looked out at the endless blue. "It's strange," she murmured, "to know the galaxy is changing because of a kitchen." He smiled faintly. "Revolutions start where people refuse to stay hungry." She laughed. A sound light enough to pierce the storm god as dawn bled into the sky once more. The two of them vanished into the fog, their forms dissolving against the light. Behind them, across every world connected to the GuildNet, a new message appeared on every console, every worker's slate, every system that tracked a human or alien name. Clause 12. The right to be seen. Voice, Nyasha. Overseer, Rian Calder, retired. And in the quiet between heartbeats, the galaxy shifted. No anthem, no gunfire, just the sound of rain on glass, and a new kind of silence, one that felt like freedom learning how to breathe.